Is teaching destroying the mental health of teachers who care the most? I can remember years ago before I was ever in education, I used to think that teachers had it made. They had every single federal holiday off. They have summers off. They are usually off in the middle of the year at wintertime or at Christmas time for about 2 weeks at a time. Usually get a week off at Thanksgiving. Not everybody does, but most teachers get a week off at Thanksgiving. They get a spring break. And I used to think, man, teachers have all this time to take care of themselves, to spend with their families. And then I became a teacher. And when I became a teacher, I learned something that you'll never learn in a handbook. It's not going to be in your employee manual. It's not going to be in your EDU classes, and your administrator is never going to tell you this. What I learned is that there are unspoken rules in education. And tonight, we want to talk in this video, we want to talk about an unspoken rule that is destroying the mental health of teachers nationwide. And we want to talk about what teachers can overdo, or what damage it's causing to teachers, and what we can do to overcome it. And so the first thing that I want to say is we're not exaggerating at all. What teachers are experiencing emotionally and mentally, it's not rare. It's not dramatic and it's not exaggerated. Rather, it's actually very measurable. Because right now in the teaching profession, more than half of the teachers, over 50% of teachers report the symptoms of burnout. Teachers report a higher level of anxiety and depression than the general workforce. Nearly 2/3 of teachers identify teaching as a primary source of chronic stress in their life. Teachers experience higher emotional exhaustion than similarly educated professionals. And fewer than half of teachers believe that they're safe to openly talk about some of the mental health struggles that they have while they're at school. And one of the interesting things is that as it relates to burnout and mental health, the burnout rate of teachers is 15 points higher than it is for law enforcement, nurses, and social workers. This is not me trying to make this a bigger deal than what it is. It's not rare. I'm not being dramatic, but it's 100% measurable by the statistics. And I want you to know that it's not because teachers aren't resilient, that somehow we're not tough enough for the job. It's not because we don't know how to manage our time or to take care of ourselves. Rather, it's because of the sustained pressure that teachers are under for 10 months out of the year without an appropriate opportunity to recover. I know that we get to rest as teachers, as in we have time off or we have time away, but that is not the same as recovery. As somebody put in our comments today, that even when we're off as teachers, we're not off because it's always something that has to be done. There's always something that has to be planned for. There's always something that has to be made ready. There's always something that we have to work on. And that is exactly what we're talking about. It is a sustained pressure without the ability to recover, and our silence about this issue only compounds the problem and makes it worse. So when teachers struggle mentally, it's not rare. What is rare is the feeling of being safe enough to say it out loud. And that's what we're doing in this video. So here's the thing. Got all kinds of resources for you down there, and I'm going to pop them up, but I want to give some shout outs right here. Carolyn just jumped in from Las Vegas. Somebody else jumped in. Oh, my goodness, in Chicago, below zero. Oh, yeah, the cluster coach. I forgot that you were in Chicago. I was out watching the Bears just a minute ago, and they threw an interception, and it looks frigid to me. So I brought a lot of resources for you tonight. We're going to talk about mental health and the effect that has. And I brought this book right here. It's called Grace for the Afflicted. It's one of the best reads that I've ever taken in on the issue of mental health and having loved ones, or if you're struggling with mental health. It's one of the best reads that I've taken in quite a while. It's linked down in the description box. It takes you over to Amazon. I think it's like 12 bucks, something like that. It's not a whole lot. Another book, and I hesitate to show this, okay? I hesitate to show this because I don't want you to think poorly of me. You know that we're a faith forward channel. But I saw this book in the bookstore and the title caught my eye. And I thought, why would somebody put a title like that on the book? And so I went over and picked it up and I scrolled through it. And I've worked through it. This is an extraordinary resource. And I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to hold it up there for you to look at. I know it's kind of, it's a little, I get it. But I promise you, this is not an inappropriate book. This is a really, really super good book to work through, and it helps deal with anxiety and worry and stuff like that. Hey, how are you? Ripples in the water. The cluster coach points us out that the paperwork has become ridiculous. Our union is working. So, we got some stuff. I'm going to put that up there right now. I'm going to put that up there. All right. Because that is 100% part of what we talk about. Why won't it come up? There we go. The paperwork has become ridiculous. Their union there in Chicago is apparently working on that. There are some things that are going on down here in Florida and in South Carolina and in the South that is really going to help with some of this. One of the things that's happening in South Carolina, and I'm going to have more to say about it maybe in a few weeks. South Carolina is working on a bill that would prevent their teachers from having to work unpaid overtime. How many of you in the chat box with a 1 thinks that needs to become legislation nationwide? No more teachers being expected to work with unpaid overtime. Because I give a 1 for that. I'm 100% for that. Southern Cal, teaching 5 to 6. Hey, Ripples in the Water. What's the temperature out there in Southern Cal? Anyway, the third resource, I want you to see this, is this book right here. It's called Sacred Rest. I recommend this all the time. It's a super read on this. 7 different types of rest, Sandra Dalton Smith. Jump down there. All 3 of those resources are in the description box. They're already linked. You can go down there, click on them. Takes you right over to Amazon and you can get it. Yes, everybody agrees. Scorpio agrees. Cluster Coach agrees. Sarah agrees. Absolutely. Ripples in the Water agrees. Absolutely. That legislation needs to pass. And I hope that the unions are able, whatever union that there is, Betty Lynch or Beth Lynch, absolutely 100%. 1 all the way around. Everybody agrees that legislation needs to pass. And I totally hope that it passes because I think that once it does pass, it's going to change the way teachers have to work in other parts of the country. Ripples in the Water says it's mid-70s, but breezy, cold in the shade. Mid-70s is what we're used to down here in Florida right now. Hey, Carolyn says, absolutely 1. That's got to pass. That's got to pass for sure. So the question has never been, is teaching hard? Of course teaching is hard. It's always been hard, and it's always going to be hard. The real question is why, when we struggle mentally or with our mental health, why does that feel like a personal failure instead of an understandable response? And the answer is not because teachers are weak. It's not because we aren't resilient. It's not because we're a bunch of babies or anything like that. Rather, it's that there's some patterns that have been ingrained into the teaching profession that train us to interpret a normal human stress in destructive ways. And there's 4 of them. And I want to take just a little bit right here and I want to call those out. Number 1, stress feels like shame. Teachers are conditioned to believe that competence equals control. So when stress appears in our life, it feels like it's evidence of us losing control. Because teaching is framed as a calling oftentimes, sometimes stress feels like a moral failure and not an occupational strain. Stress, chronic stress, is an occupational strain of teaching. Now, the reason why it turns to shame is because stress is interpreted is it isn't stress isn't interpreted as this is a tough job. Stress is often interpreted as I should be handling this better. I should be doing more. I should be able to do this. This shouldn't bother me in the way that it does. And over time, stress stops being something that you experience and it becomes something that you are. Stress becomes shame when teachers believe that human feelings or the feeling of being overwhelmed means that somehow they are inadequate instead of just being a person, instead of just being a human being. Number two, exhaustion becomes guilt. Exhaustion is normalized and it's quietly rewarded in the teaching profession because being tired is seen as evidence of dedication. I don't know how many times I've heard that throughout my life. If you're not tired, you're not teaching. Well, I guess there's some truth to that, but being tired is not, or being exhausted is not evidence of your dedication. It may very well be evidence of a mismanaged approach to the job. And oftentimes, rest is framed as something that's optional, or we say, hey, if I can make it to the break, or if I can just make it to Christmas, or if I can just make it to summer, I'm going to be okay. And so we see during our time in class, or our time at school, we oftentimes think that rest is optional because something else is going. And sometimes it's even seen as indulgent. Other people look at it as if it's a selfish thing for a teacher to want to take rest. And I'm going to tell you what my advice is to you. And not everybody agrees with this, but if you have days, take them. That's what they're there for, because if something happens to you, those days are just going to sit there. If you get non-renewed, those days are gone. Or if you leave, not every place will let you transfer your time in. If you've got days, take them. Take care of yourself. Now, the reason why exhaustion turns to guilt is because when you feel exhausted, you don't think that you need to recover. You don't think I need recovery. You think that you must not be doing enough, or you must not be doing things right. And then we look at others, and then we fall into the comparison trap. And we think that others are doing more. Other people are able to handle this load. Why is it only me? And so taking a break feels like that we're taking something away from our students, or that somehow we're cheating our school, or somehow we're cheating our administration, or something along those lines. And the fact of the matter is, none of those things are true. Exhaustion becomes guilt when rest is treated as a personal choice instead of a biological need. Biologically, we need rest. And we need periods of time where we can completely detach from the teaching profession, or from the thing that it is that we do. Number three, needing help is often seen or felt as if it's incompetence, because the teacher culture values independence. It values independence and it values endurance. And asking for help is oftentimes subtly associated with being unable to handle your work. And oftentimes, even whenever we go to our admin and we tell them that we need help, we're told, hey man, you just need to manage your time better, or you need to plan a little bit better, or you need to do this. And very little, or very often, is there support that actually shows up in a way that will help us. And so support is often reactive instead of preventative. And what I mean by that is we don't often ask for help until we're completely overwhelmed, we're completely exhausted, and we're at the point of breaking. And I think a different approach is better. Let's be proactive in asking for help. Let's be proactive in our opportunities to take rest. And so when this turns to incompetence, teachers feel like asking for help will change how others perceive them, or how they're perceived, how their admin perceives them, or how their colleagues perceive them. Because help feels like sometimes a threat to professional credibility. Once again, there's this idea that we should be able to independently handle all of the things that are being placed on our table. Kind of like what we pointed out earlier is the paperwork alone is overwhelming. Just the paperwork that teachers have to do is overwhelming. And so silence feels safer than being misunderstood or labeled. And so we just simply stay quiet about it. But here's the thing. Needing help becomes incompetence when the system rewards self-sufficiency more than sustainability. The system that we are caught in is not a sustainable system. All of us, we're just trying to work our way through a system that is not designed for the health of the individual teacher. And number 4, silence is safer than honesty. Mental health conversations oftentimes feel very risky, in particular whenever you're in an evaluative environment like teachers. Everything we do is being looked at, or at least sometimes that's the way I feel, and probably some of you feel that way. I mean, the admin comes into your room. They may be in there just to see, maybe just to say hey or see what's going on, but it feels evaluative. And there are a lot of administrators, their whole entire relationship with you is evaluative. And whenever you're in that type of environment, the idea of being able to talk about your mental health is pretty risky. Teachers are constantly observed, we're measured, and we're compared, and vulnerability feels permanent. And it shouldn't. Vulnerability shouldn't be something that we have to be afraid of as teachers. And not oftentimes it is. And the reason why silence is safer than honesty is because silence protects reputation. A lot of times we feel like that if we talk about the things that we're struggling with, that somehow that's going to damage us in the eyes of other people. Again, how we're perceived. Silence also avoids judgment because we all know how that little line goes out there amongst teachers. They talk, and we don't want to be the target of their talk. Silence prevents additional expectations or scrutiny as well. And so that's what we choose. And all of this comes with a cost. None of it's free. The cost of all of this is what starts as self-protection eventually turns into isolation. Isolation, in turn, intensifies burnout. And burnout deepens the shame and ultimately destroys the mental health of teachers. I've told this, I don't know how many times, but a little over 3 years ago, I woke up and my face was completely paralyzed. I thought I had a stroke. My kids thought I had a stroke. The kids at school thought I had a stroke. Everybody thought I had a stroke, except for my doctor. And he says, John, he says, you didn't have a stroke. He said, but if you don't do something about your stress is going to do something about you. And he meant that I was going to have a catastrophic health event. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. And I just kept working. I didn't take another day off for an entire year. But at the end of that year, I had so isolated myself that I began to believe that I was the only person that this was happening to. I began to believe that everybody was picking on me. And I believed that there was something wrong with me. And that's what this does. Silence is safer than honesty because when teachers believe the truth will cost them more than it will help them heal, they stay silent. And all of this is the result of the unspoken rule. So before we go on, lots of people jumping in. Want to make sure we get everybody a shout out right here and see what all's going on. Man, if you haven't jumped in yet and you haven't told us where you're coming from, let us know. I'm like solo tonight and I don't have a moderator or anything, so I got to work my way back up into the chat and see what's going on and see what's hey, Scorpio took last Thursday off, refused to feel guilty. Listen, top notch. Don't feel guilty. Don't ever let anybody make you feel bad about taking off. If you have the time, take it. Don't take it to the grave with you. You never know what's going to happen. Absolutely. The substitute couldn't believe how crazy the students were. Now, I can tell you, I'm the dean of students at my school, and I know when teachers aren't at school because I know how crazy they can be. So here's a good one right here. Let's put this up right here. That is, I can't see who that is. Tam and Fam 25. Teachers can encourage students to be proactive and help themselves. Absolutely. Can absolutely do that. Ribbles and Water says that she's over that now. She's tenured. I finally stopped being nervous when people walk through. That's what I'm talking about. So I think that's as cool as anything can come. And the heck of it is that in Florida, they took our tenure away in Florida. We can't be tenured anymore. So all the teachers that have ever been tenured have almost worked their way out. However, there is like an unspoken rule in our district that once you get past like 3 years in our district, basically you are tenured. Pretty much nobody gets non-renewed after being in our district for 3 years. I mean, you'd have to really like mess up. Are you afraid? You're afraid what you say will be used against you. So, Sarah, I gotta say that me personally, probably not, because I've been in education so long and I've been at our school so long that I can be a little bit more outspoken than other people. But based upon what I see in a lot of the chats that pop up or the comments on a lot of the videos that I do, there's a lot of teachers that are afraid. They're afraid to say anything because of fear of retribution from their admin or from their district. I've often worried about being on here because, Doc Pender's not with me. We work together and we often talk about issues that are pertinent, we think, to education and to teachers. And I've often wondered, if they were ever going to call us on the carpet and tell us that we needed to be quiet. However, I would say this, that, one of the toughest conversations that I had with my administration was a little over almost 3 years ago. I went and I sat down with them and I laid out some pretty strict boundaries. I was pretty nervous about that because, they could have perceived that in any kind of way. It was a very professional conversation. They were very receptive. And I laid out some boundaries and just kind of said what I would do, what I wouldn't do, and they accepted that. And it worked out really well for me. Other people, apparently, it's not as easy as that is. Hey, there is Darth Cuddles right there, all the way from Australia. Holy cow. See, that's what I'm talking about. This is the power of YouTube and TikTok and other social platforms, is the ability to reach people and the ability to be helpful. And that is exactly what we want to do at Teacher Talk. Thank you for jumping in here. Got a couple of resources. I'm going to throw them up there and then I'm going to come back to the chat. Just wanted to remind you there are free resources down in the chat right there, or you can get them right there at the QR, or you can go down into the description box. There's all kinds of free resources down there, so don't be afraid to go get that. Hike with Mike, one of my favorites right there. Look what he puts up right there. Micromanaging and focus on standards and not just teaching is what makes teaching suck. Teaching is an art, not a science. So there is an art portion to it, and you're absolutely right. Being stuck to standards, also, whenever there's so many standards to cover, is what I think. If you didn't, I don't know how it is in your state, but I can tell you in Florida, you get into like a civics class, there's like 150 standards to cover. I don't even know how you can get through them, right? Because, today a lot of students don't have the same background knowledge that other students had. And you got to take a lot of time and you got to front load students and this and that and the other, and you just can't get to it. Now, Sarah makes a good point right here. Dangerous territory. That's exactly where we're at. And I didn't think about that, Darth. What time is it down? What time is it in Australia? You're just now getting started down there. What's going on? I really can't. I really can't figure that time. And you're in like summertime right at the moment, right? Am I correct about that? Scorpio puts up there such a toxic culture, and the education culture can be. It sure can be. I don't know to it that there's anything that we can actually do about that other than the way that we carry ourselves at work and trying to be kind and trying to make improvements, which is why we try to talk directly to teachers and try to help teachers as individuals and not try to worry about the bad things about the system other than what the system is doing to teachers. And it is literally destroying the health, mental health, physical health of teachers. And we want to help in that way. The best standards. That's a Florida teacher right there. Tam and Fam. Where are you at in Florida, if you don't mind? I know those, I know that term right there. It's messy, overwhelming. Yes, yes. We have to weed through the standards. You're absolutely right. Let's see. Darth Cuddle says that it's 10:30 a.m. in Australia and it is summertime. I knew it was summertime. Also, before we run off, just a couple more resources. This is really good if you struggle with mental health or have a loved one. I offer these. I just put them down in the description box for you to get, and you can jump down there. There's an Amazon link down there to take you right to it. This is a great read. Another great read here that we talk about all the time is Sacred Rest. Sandra Dalton Smith. She talks about 7 different types of rest. On this subject, this is the number one read that I've ever read on the issue of rest. Check it out, get it, and take it. And again, I hesitate to show this because we're a faith forward, and I know sometimes, but I saw this and it grabbed my attention, and I went over and looked at it, and I looked through it. This is a wonderful, wonderful workbook. It is not inappropriate. I know the title is a little bit inappropriate, but I promise you there's nothing inside of it that's inappropriate. It is all good stuff. In particular, if you struggle with anxiety, if you struggle with overthinking and stuff like that, super, super, super good. It'll help you work through those issues. So jump down to Jacksonville, Duval, baby. I can't believe my Jags got beat last week, gave that game up. By the way, my son lives over in Jacksonville, him and his wife. His wife goes to the University of North Florida. She's a Division I track athlete at University of North Florida, and she's getting ready to graduate, and so they live over there. And my son, he was a college football player, and he went to college out in Kansas and played out there for a while. And then he came home and he went to fire college, and so he's got to take the national something on the firefighter stuff on Wednesday, and he got hired. He's going to be working over at Flagler Beach, and so that's pretty cool for him. So know the area, know it well. Got one last one right here with Hike with Mike. I never had a student ask me what standard are we going to learn. I haven't either. Holy cow. I haven't either. I've never had one come in and say, man, what standard can we learn today? Right? Never. Absolutely never. It's incredible. What is important to the state is not necessarily important to students or even to teachers. So the question that you might have is, what is the unspoken rule? And the unspoken rule is this: if teaching is hurting your mental health, then you must be the problem. And I'm not saying that's true, but I'm saying that's the perspective of the system. A lot of times that's the perspective of our administration. If you are struggling, then it must be because you are doing something wrong. And I find that to be the ultimate gaslight of teachers. I mean, because it could never be the workload, could it? It couldn't be the fact that teachers have to work on average 15 hours a week overtime just to complete their job. It couldn't be the endless expectations that flow from the top down and they land in the teacher's classroom. It couldn't be any of those, could it? I mean, it couldn't be the lack of support. All over Florida, we are in a budget crisis. Every school in Florida is having a budget crisis. And all of a sudden, there's this hiring freeze. There's this desire to do away with units and all this other stuff. So it couldn't be that we struggle with our mental health because of a lack of support. It couldn't be because there's a system that's been put together that's been going on for 150 years now or however long. It's archaic in its approach. It couldn't be any of that. It must be that we are doing something wrong. And that is the unspoken rule that is destroying the mental health of teachers. It is simply gaslighting. Now, here's how the rule operates. First of all, that rule isn't written down anywhere. You can't find the rule. Again, it's not going to be in your district manual. It's not going to be in any of your teacher books. It's not there. But it is reinforced culturally. Now, I say that with great confidence because at one time I thought that that was only me. I thought that I was the only one that felt that way. But now, after a full year of talking with almost 500,000 teachers around the world, it is my firm conviction that this is a cultural and systemic problem in education. And I'll tell you where it shows up. It shows up in the tone, oftentimes, of our leadership. It shows up in our evaluations a lot of times. And it shows up in comparison. Being compared to other teachers that seemingly have it all together. And it teaches teachers to self-monitor and to self-blame. That is what that rule does. And that is how it operates. Now, the question that you may have is, if that's the case, then why in the world do teachers keep going along with this? And there are 4 reasons why. Number 1 is fear. Teachers are afraid. We talked about that just a moment ago. Teachers are afraid of repercussions. They're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of being labeled as unable to handle the tough job of teaching. There's fear of evaluation consequences. There's fear of being or appearing to be weak. There's fear of being replaceable, although that should be one of our least fears because there's no line outside the door trying to replace teachers today. In education or in the teaching profession, being silent or being strong is often means being silent or keeping your mouth shut. Now, teaching, whenever you deal with fear, teaching then becomes an identity and not a vocation. And I want you to hear me clearly. Teaching is not your identity. It is a job, and it has to be approached that way. And when we struggle, those struggles feel like a threat to our self-worth because our identity and our job, they begin to fuse together. Number 2, when teaching is who you are, struggling feels like a personal collapse. And that is very difficult for some of us to deal with. Number 3, calling confusion. Calling confusion. We often hear this a lot of times in the teaching circles, that teaching is a calling. And I don't have a single problem with that thought process at all. But there is a belief that when something is a calling, that sacrifice equals faithfulness. Endurance becomes the moral currency. And somewhere along the way, we got this idea that suffering got mistaken for faithfulness. The two are not the same. Faithfulness, it is showing up every day. It is doing the best that we can. It is sometimes going the extra mile. But what it is not a reckless abandonment of our identity. It is not an abandonment of taking care of ourselves. It is not an abandonment of our values. And it's not an abandonment of our physical and mental and emotional health. It simply is not. And yet that's where we end up sometimes because it's a calling. And because it's a calling, we keep at it. Again, I got no problem with the calling thing at all. Number 4, comparison pressure. Everybody else seems like they're doing just fine. Everybody else is able to manage the job. Nobody else is struggling in the same way that I'm struggling. And so struggling isolates, or at least that's the way we feel. And when our identity is tied to endurance, the struggles or the need for rest or recovery oftentimes feels like a failure on our part. So, ah, look at this. Did y'all see who's in here? Let me go back up here. Wow. Wow. Let me get back up here and go through these. I got to go through these. We got so many people in here. I saw John. There's my good friend John out in Indiana. He says he said it was going to be 0 this morning. It's pretty cold out there. Ripples in the water. Unfortunately, yes. Darvis. Man, there's so many comments coming in. I can't keep up with it. Darvis says, oh my goodness. Hike with Mike. My district had turned to be hyper focused on learning targets. Kids don't care. That's exactly right. I'm going to put that up right there. I don't know of any kid that cares about what standard we're working on or what the target is. And I know that sometimes those things are important because they help us, stay on track, but there's no kids that care about it. Check this out right here. Yes, the blame falls on teachers for almost everything at schools. It is 100% gaslight. Thanks, Tam and Fam. But look who's in here. Look who's in here. Look, there's the old Doc Pender right there. Agreed, reinforced culturally. And we have the ability to make changes one teacher at a time. That is exactly what we're working for here at Teacher Talk. We can't change the system. We can't change what's going on, but we want to change one teacher at a time. Look here. So there, 2 years ago, I saw an ADHD diagnosis. My admin called HR. I got called to a meeting and was given a printed copy of my job description. How nice. How nice. So there's old Ripples in Water struggling, and she gets called to HR. That's how it works in education right there. Definitely never struggled so much with fear as I have this past year. I'm going to put that up right there. Thank you. Who is that? BMI Refuge. Good deal, man. Thanks for jumping in. Appreciate you being here. This year with, let's see, never struggled so much with fear as I have this past year. My first year as a new teacher. Gotcha. Look right here. Doc Pender jumping in there again. Holy cow. I can't believe Doc's here. Glad you're here. Yes, it's so important to take care of yourselves. Everything John is saying is super helpful for all teachers. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Very true. Here we go. Mental health. There's a good one. Very true. Mental health first aid begins with our own oxygen mask being secured. 100%. 100%. So we talked last week, talked about who's your mama. And that phrase, who's your mama, I've always used that in a class that I used to teach at our district. And what that means is one meaningful adult and one meaningful activity. Every kid needs one meaningful adult and one meaningful activity. If a kid has that, they stand a greater chance of doing well in school and just doing well in life in general. But the same is also true for teachers. Teachers need one meaningful adult and one meaningful activity. That's how you put your oxygen mask on right there, or at least in part, that's how you put your oxygen mask. Doc Pender says, hey, y'all. She's been out and about. We're going to be back next week. I wanted to tell everybody we're here every Sunday at 7 p.m. We're going to be back next week, and we are starting a series, a 3-part series. It's going to be on teacher well-being. We're going to talk about, teacher mental health. We're going to talk about that further. We're going to talk about, the necessity of those meaningful activities. We got a couple other things we're going to get there, and I have a guest that's going to be coming with us. Super excited. If you're on my email list, you'll get all about it on Tuesday. You'll see our guest. If you're not on our email list, jump down there and grab, or you can scan right here. Just jump in there in the description box or use the QR code. Grab one of our free resources that automatically puts you on the email list. And our newsletter comes out on Tuesday. You'll meet our guest, one of our colleagues, and I cannot wait for next week. It's going to be so much fun. Not that this isn't fun, but next week is going to be funner, for a lack of better words. So there it is. We're rolling on. Doc's in here. I can't believe she showed up, and we're having a great time. And let's see, did I miss anything? Did I miss anything? I don't think I did. So listen, we're gonna work on through. We're gonna get to the end right here, and then we're gonna talk about some things. And so, another question that you might have is, how do we take care of ourselves as teachers? What do we do? And the answer to that, from my perspective, is very simple. Again, we are a faith forward channel, and it's not because we want to be offensive or anything like that, because we don't. But that's just who we are. And our core verse at Teacher Talk is this: Proverbs chapter 4, verse number 23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. When the inner person, the person that you are on the inside, when it gets out of balance and doesn't readily get back into balance, before long, life begins to spiral. Everybody out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so healing and teaching doesn't begin with fixing yourself or working harder. It begins by guarding what it begins by guarding our hearts. Because for far too long, we have allowed things to get into our life, external issues into our life, and it has disturbed our internal person. And so I want to just say up front, I just want to say that guarding your heart is not pulling away from students. It's not even pulling away from work. It's protecting the source of things that care for you. When the heart is depleted, everything else downstream suffers. Wisdom does not demand endurance without limits. And that's why we talk about boundaries here all the time. You have to protect your source, and your source is your inner person. And the way that you do that is with boundaries. You have to set personal and professional boundaries. Down in the description box, there is a free resource down there for you. It's Reclaim Your Limits. Jump down there and grab it. It's one of our top free resources, and it'll help you set those boundaries really well. Now, there are drivers of healing. The first thing is awareness. We have to become aware of what's going on, and we have to move from what's wrong with me to what's wrong with the environment that I'm in and what it's requiring of me. Do you see the difference? Whenever we're up there on the other side, where all the blame game is, where the unspoken rule is at work, we're the problem. But if you want to heal, you have to properly identify the problem. Now, there could be things that you're struggling with, and you may need to make some adjustments, namely putting boundaries in place. But the system, that's not your problem. Being gaslit into believing that you should be more, that you should do more, that you should be able to handle more, that's not your problem. And so we don't ask what's wrong with me. We ask what's wrong with the environment that I'm in and what it's requiring me to do. Now, the cool thing about awareness is awareness 100% automatically breaks the shame cycle. No longer do you have to feel ashamed. Ashamed that you can't handle it, ashamed that you can't do this, or ashamed that you're not able to keep up with that over there. And that is the beginning of healing, because you can't heal if you keep personalizing things. Number 2, you need permission instead of guilt. You need to see rest as optional and not as earned. Taking a break, taking a day off, taking some time away, that is not something that you have to earn or I have to earn. That is something that we can do because we are people. Rest is a requirement. You need to recognize it as a requirement and see rest as a protective measure and not as weakness, regardless of what anybody says. It is not weak to need to take time off and get away. Now, I got to tell you, at the height of burnout, I absolutely struggled with that issue. And in fact, that's what got me there. I used to get so mad. I would see teachers take all this time off, and we would all have to go out and we'd have to work on all this other stuff, and we'd have to make up and pick up the slack. I used to get so mad. But you know what? Looking back, they were the smart ones. They were the wise ones, and they understood that there were just times that they had to get away. And that's what you and I do. You see, guilt keeps teachers locked up in a depletion cycle. Permission opens the door to recovery. Isn't that cool? Now, number 3, reframed identity instead of incompetence. We got to make a shift from needing help means I'm failing to seeking support is a form of wisdom and self-care. So if you haven't figured it out yet, we're working on mindset issues. All right. The system has ingrained a mindset into us, a way to think. And we are using the wisdom of the proverb to guard our hearts above all else, because from it flow the issues of life, to take that mindset and turn it up on top of its head in a healthy way. You see, before, needing help, that means I've got a problem. Something's wrong with me. I'm not doing things right. But now all of a sudden, seeking support is a form of wisdom and self-care. And here's the reason why. Because identity fusion is one of the most dangerous parts about burnout. When your identity gets tied to what you do, you will burn out, because what you do will ultimately fail and will not provide you emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually with the things that you need to be healthy. Healing requires separating worth from your output. So unfortunately, we live in a hustle culture where people are evaluated or they're seen as valuable based upon what they produce. That is absolutely no different in the teaching world. You and I know that. Teachers who produce the most or produce the best results, they're seen as more important maybe than others. And I want you to know that that's not true. It's not true at all. Your value is not dependent upon what you produce or how much you produce. That's not where your value comes from. And that's not where your identity comes from either. Number 4, safe connections instead of silence. And what we're going to shift from carrying everything alone to sharing honestly in spaces that are psychologically safe. And that's what Teacher Talk is all about, is we have become a community. We've become a community of teachers where teachers come. They're able to share. They're able to share their tea and not worry about it getting back to their administration or worrying about other teachers finding out what they struggle with. You have no idea the amount of people that contact me just to share, to have somebody that listens, to have somebody that can understand what it is that they're dealing with. That's what Teacher Talk is all about. And you need that, because silence intensifies burnout, but community normalizes reality. Isn't that cool? Isn't that great? And I'm going to tell you what, we're fired up in here tonight. We've got all kinds of comments. I'm going to try to get back up here and see what I can learn. A couple of things. Holy cow, there's so many. Look right here, ripples in water. Man, they got it right there. Where did that go? I'm having a hard time getting through it. There's so many comments. I sure do appreciate everybody jumping in here. Wow, ripples in water. Where did you put that at? Used to feel so guilty. Oh, there. I still never did whatever it was asking me to do. She went to the principal and I stood my ground. Good deal. Good deal. Doc Pender points out a good one right here. Knowing your contract and district rules can help in those ways. And I'm still looking for the one that Ripples in Water put up right there. because I thought it was the best one yet. Goodness gracious, I need a moderator. There it is, right there. Teaching is not your life. It's just your occupation. Not to my know-it-all first-year partner. Now, ripples in water, the terrible thing, and you're going to have to help your partner, because what's going to happen is your partner is going to end up breaking down, because you cannot go at that type of a pace and survive very well or for very long. Those of us that have been in the water, or those of us that have been in this business for a long time, know exactly what that's like. So math is helpful. Look right there. Math is also helpful. For example, if I only had 150 students, 5 minutes per student is 12.5 hours. Pointing out those figures that is good stuff right there. I didn't even think of that. Did anybody else think of that? Yeah, I know ripples in water, but I tell you what, this job has a way of making us understand, if you know what I mean. So I wouldn't stress it out too much. I would just be there for them and try to, give as much encouragement, as much guidance as possible. And, ultimately everything's going to fall where it's going to fall. But I feel like, this is just a lesson that sometimes, they have to learn on their own. It's just a thing that they got to deal with. So healing doesn't begin when the system changes. It begins when teachers stop turning system pressure into self-judgment. Caring deeply should not cost you your well-being. Teachers deserve to be whole humans, and you're not broken for feeling this way. So teacher, if you feel that way, I want you to know that you're not alone, that you're not broken. But most of all, I want you to learn about another unspoken rule, and you can see it in that video right there. But more than that, stay strong and keep teaching. So I wonder, before we jump off, and we got Doc Pender in there, is there anything anybody wants to talk about before we jump off? Because it has been a great live. I appreciate it. I think on the last live, I don't know how many chats we had. Something like, I don't know, there were 200 or more chats. And I know full well next week is going to be a super live. Doc Pender's going to be in here with us, and we're going to have our one of our friends, teacher colleague with us, and it is going to be an extraordinarily good series. Want to encourage you once again. Just a couple of resources before we go. I'm going to put them back up there on the screen. All right, all of the free resources can be found right here at the QR code or down in the description box. But once again, this is a great book. If you struggle with mental illness or have a loved one that does, this is super great. Grace for the Afflicted. One of the best reads that I've ever had on the issue. Also on the issue of rest, 7 different types of rest. Sandra Dalton Smith, she shares about it in her book. All these are linked down in the description. They're on Amazon, so you can just jump right over there and get them. Don't judge me on this title. I sent it over to Doc Pender, and she approved whenever I got it. I know that that the title's a little bit inappropriate, but I promise you there's nothing in the book that's inappropriate. I promise you that. This is one of the best books on anxiety and overthinking that I've ever used. So I want you to jump down there and grab that. I think it's like $12. So jump down there. It's over on Amazon. Go get it, okay? So it's right there. Question. Here we got ripples in the water. Let's put it up there on the screen. Let's talk about what to do when admin puts out a directive that doesn't work. Oh, man. Wow. Golly, I wish I had a good answer for that. And I'm going to default back to what Dr. Pender and I talk about a lot. And that is that data speaks louder than complaints, if you can understand what I'm saying. So if there is a directive that's been given, all right, we can't just be insubordinate. we're going to have to follow through, at least to some degree. But in our follow through, we should keep very careful data points to demonstrate this is not working and that we need to make a change. One of my teacher colleagues, I, um, uh, she's very good at that. She's one of the best teachers that I've ever worked with in my entire life. She is a master teacher. Everybody goes to her because they need her to bring scores up. She is a master teacher. And that is, this happens all the time in her area where there's a directive given from the district or from whatever that directly contradicts with the things that she does, and she knows that it's going to impact students in a negative way, and so she just works her way through it the best that she can. But the data speaks the truth. Keep data. All right. A lot of other people right here, they say, hey, you might get annoyed. Okay, you might get annoyed, looks at first, but no one can argue with math facts. All right, that's exactly what we're talking about as it relates to data. Biggest consequences I ever got was my classes taken away from me. Mentally prepare for principal is in charge of schedule. Now, they're hitting on something right here that's really, really important. Number one is the retaliation piece. If you do say something, having things taken away from you. But number two is that math is just math. Data is just data. So when you have data points, you don't have to go to the administrator and say, hey, your ideal sucks. You can say, hey, look, I've been working this thing out for the last 4 or 5 weeks. Here's my data. I want to show you what's happening now versus what was happening previously. All right. That takes all the personal problems out of it. That doesn't mean that your data or that your administrator won't get mad or something like that, especially if you prove to them that, something's not working. But it means that you've done it in a professional way. And what you say is, here it is. All right, let's see right here. What did he say? I've been asking admin to demonstrate it for me. Yes. I bet you do get crickets, brother. I bet you do, the cluster coach. Hey, we got a whole crowd in here. I wanted to point that out because it was, again, the cluster coach was the first. I became eligible for monetization in like the middle of the night. And I woke up the very next day and I clicked on memberships. And it was like 2 minutes after I clicked on memberships that the cluster coach was a member of the Teacher Talk community. I don't even know how that happened, but we want as many people to be a part of the Teacher Talk community. I don't even know what the membership levels are. I don't even know how to set that stuff up yet. So it's down there. Anyway, if you've received any encouragement, any support, if you any value that we share with you whatsoever, if any of it's valuable to you, join us. That's our only means of support. And, we got a couple other things that we do, but almost every single thing that we do is free. If you can super chat us, that's great. That helps with our support or whatever those things are. That's super. We want to be able to keep doing what we're doing. And it's getting pretty difficult because we are reaching, the goal this year is to reach 1 million teachers with what it is that we're doing. Here's some advice right here. I think depending on the directive, find easiest, quickest way to comply. That's exactly right. If it's busy work, there's a good idea. Just don't do it. I was scared when first did that, but no one even knew because it was busy work. That's exactly what happens to us a lot of times. We get busy work. Hey, look at what TAM 525 put in here. Qualitative data and quantitative data. Share stories, especially student experiences. That's it. Dr. Pender, look at her jumping in here. Good. I knew she wouldn't overlook that. Data is non-emotional, and that is power. Ripples in the water, that's how you do it right there. You got to go with the evidence and not with your feelings. Don't let your feelings get caught up in it. Our feelings get us in trouble, or at least they have me historically. That's it. I don't even know. I think it's less than $10. I don't even know what it is. I appreciate it, Tam and fam. I do. Listen, we're on a mission. All right. We can't change the system, but we are on a mission to help teachers. We want to help teachers. All right. Dr. Pender and uh, and we'll tell this, I know we tell this story all the time. We sit in her office, I don't know, probably for a good year, talking about doing this and working on it. And I started on it first with my hobby of refurbishing furniture. And I started making these little videos and putting them up on Facebook and this and that and the other. And before long, I had this great big business that I couldn't even, I couldn't even keep up with. And so then I jumped over to the YouTube, and she's in the YouTube right now. The Cluster Coach says it's $4.99. Appreciate that, Cluster Coach. Thank you so much. I don't even know what super chats and all that stuff is. All right, I'm gonna learn, but the truth of it is, I am so busy trying to make content and get stuff out that none of that portion even much matters. But I appreciate everybody. If nobody's got anything, I'm going to jump off of here and I'm going to go watch the Bears, and we'll be back next Sunday night, 7 o'clock. All right, got Doc Pender, got a special guest going to be in here. We're going to talk about teacher well-being. I think our first one, yes, Sarah. So yeah, follow up with an email too. Absolutely. Ripples in the water. I hope you got that. Always document through email. All right. It is the paper trail that'll save your neck. Yep. Doc Pender's right. We're just learning as we go. So come learn with us, and let's build a movement of teachers. Okay. Stay strong.